Hi everyone, I'm Cassie Mercer from portraitdetective.com.au and I'm here to talk about historical images and photographs. Today we're talking occupations and uniforms, and I'm joined by special guest historian Craig Wilcox. Craig has worked at the Australian War Memorial and authored quite a few books on the topic of military history and uniforms. Well, Craig, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. We met a few years ago, didn't we, when I was publishing Inside History magazine, and you very generously wrote some articles for us. And you just finished a book published by the National Library of Australia called Badge, Boot and Button, the story of Australian uniforms. And you cover convicts, military personnel, public servants, sporting teams, among so much else. It's a really fascinating book. And so I thought we'd talk through some of the images that you have in here. So let's dive straight in, shall we?
Great, let's go.
My first question is, what was the first uniform in Australia?
Well, the first uniforms regularly worn in Australia would have come with the first fleet. We're talking about the Marines in pretty simple red coats and white leg wear and black top hats to protect them a bit from the sun. We're talking naval officers in blue and gold, although mostly they would have taken that off and worn in shirt sleeves. And I suppose in a sense, we're also talking about the Reverend Richard Johnson in his black and white sort of coat gown outfit, which was once typical of the Anglican Church. But then there's a question of what's the first uniform created here or adapted here, and that probably belongs to the Mounted and Border Police in the 1830s, 1840s, when they very quickly decide that it's no use operating in the Australian bush, or at any rate outside of towns, in the normal constricted clothes that they would have done, and that maybe some old green and blue stuff with a straw hat is just what you needed.
Amazing. There's such a rich history in uniforms, isn't there? Let's talk about convict outfits. You'll see some images coming up on screen of very early convicts. The first one is from 1793, a drawing, and then there's another one that's much later, around the 1830s, I think. How did convict uniforms change over time?
They changed, for the men at least, by becoming uniform. You start off with what the British government called slops, which was a kind of coarse, cheap stuff for men in blue or grey. The same stuff that was issued to naval sailors before they had uniform. And they're standardised clothes because they're made by the same manufacturers to the same specifications pretty much, but they're not uniform themselves. But then along with the idea of prisons and other kind of prison reform in the 19th century, comes the notion that you ought to humiliate the worst offenders as well as identify them in front of the public by putting them in clothes which mocked them, which humiliated them, clothes which are half black and half yellow or half black and half white, whatever. That kind of stuff comes in, and you mark the people as literally the property of the government, in the same way that the British government Board of Ordnance stamp was put on a barrel of gunpowder. It was put on the costume of the worst convicts. And there are other markers as well, indicating where they were working, what gang they belonged to, stuff like that. But what's really interesting, I think, is that the process is opposite for women convicts, and we see one in that picture that you put up first, I think. And what you see there is an attempt to make women convicts more genteel, to give them the best clothes that they've ever had, not the cheapest, which is the case with the men. And the idea here is that the women convicts should be elevated, they would have said at the time, made to respect themselves and be respected by people looking at them, and that there'd be a kind of moral reform for them through the costume, which was never uniform. It was just standardised cheap clothing, but nonetheless was meant to be better than what they'd had before.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's so interesting, isn't it? I can understand that being branded and the property of someone, but from the female point of view, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's right. It's almost a humanitarian idea that comes in at the same time as you get the ideas about prison reform and you get the ideas about freeing slaves. It really belongs with that.
So what sort of occupations had uniforms in general?
Oh, so many. They're just countless. They're everywhere. People who work for government, people who work for large corporations. In that picture of two men in blue on the horses, you see an interesting case of people who've imitated police uniforms because they work for a security service. So not only do the police have a pretty standard kind of blue with brass button thing going, in the 19th century and well into the 20th, but people who want to look like they have some kind of authority too are going to move into that as well. So those two security guards who worked for a gold escort, I think in the 1850s. But you also get uniforms which are worn by shopkeepers, counter staff, and you have another picture there which you see someone who, again in a police uniform or a store security or greeting man or doorman or whatever, who's in a similar uniform to a policeman. And you'll see a shop assistant over on the left who probably isn't really wearing uniform, but is wearing a standard occupational dress, which is pretty close to it. And that takes us to domestic servants. We forget that domestic service was big in Australia right until the 1920s. And domestic servants had distinct kinds of uniforms too, which have now passed away. We've forgotten about the livery servants that the richer merchants and graziers used to have, which were quite dramatic, but disappeared completely, well, pretty much in the 1840s. So there's those. And then there's the clergy as well, and the lawyers in their robes, which indicated that they're learned people. Again, these are not quite uniforms, but they're virtually uniforms. They're signals to everybody else that this is what I work as, this is what I know, and this is the authority that I have.
Mm. I'm just flicking through your book as you talk. So here's Edmund Barton's wig and robes. So I guess that's the sort of thing that...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the wig is a really interesting thing. The wig initially isn't in Australia. People think quite rightly that it doesn't suit our climate. It's just too heavy. I mean, as much as people were into replicating European civilization in Australia, they did draw the line at certain points. And one of them was wigs for judges and barristers at first. But then with the big migration of people in the 1850s, 1860s into Australia, the barristers who came out said, well, we're no inferior to English barristers. We should have wigs too. What are you saying about Australia? That we don't have, are we not good enough to have wigs? Well, we should have them as well. And so it comes in here too.
Wow. And you mentioned domestic servants. There's this great image of a woman dressed, wearing the uniform of a maid.
In that classic outfit. Two interesting things about that photo. One, the dog pushing its way into the photograph saying, I want attention. I really like that because
it's slightly furry. Really, it was moving.
It's just really typical. It just says, come on, pay attention to me. So I like that. But also note that she's not wearing a hat. If she was an English domestic servant, she would have what's called a mob cap, which is it kind of looks like a shower cap. And you think about BBC television programs, you can kind of work out what I mean. But that's not worn in Australia. In Australia, the domestic service industry, if you like, was just as big as in Britain. But it also drew a line and it said, we are not much different from our employers. We certainly are able to talk to them, look them in the eye, be treated more as employees than as members of the household. And one thing we're not going to do is wear a cap which makes us look like we're servile.
Was there a pride among people wearing a uniform? You mentioned security guards previously, I guess, and how similar they were to police uniforms. Would that indicate that people were very proud to be in a uniform?
It depends on the uniform. It depends whether the uniform's in fashion, whether it represents something which has an authority which is not questioned. And that takes you back to barristers and clergy. They'll be the proudest of all in in their semi-uniforms. But yeah, it is pretty large. I've got a couple of quotes here, which, because I've got rubbish eyesight, I'll hold this at a really strange angle, but we won't go into that. With any luck, people at home can't see us. The Melbourne Argus in 1853 was talking about Goldfields Police and saying that they should lay aside their silver lace and other ornaments in which certain police officers delight themselves. There's another newspaper in 1864 talking about the native police with its Aboriginal recruits. And that said, they are not a little proud of the Queen's uniform and they affect a vast superiority over their non-military friends. And then there's a case of a Maryland's post deliverer, a mail deliverer, who got into a fight in 1914 in Sydney. And the newspaper reporting the case in court said that he wouldn't remove his coat and hat to start the fight. Sorry, he wanted to remove his coat and hat to start the fight and said to the other guy, I don't want to disgrace the King's uniform. So he wanted to take that off. And I don't think that that was just a device. I think that that's a kind of genuine feeling when you've got a uniform that represents a valued service or a valued employer.
My last question, what would be your best tip for someone wanting to find out more about a uniform that an ancestor is wearing? Do you have favourite resources, or where would you start, do you think?
Yeah, the best tip is to sit down with a cup of tea and just tell yourself this is going to take a long time. It's really difficult because there's such a commonality in most civilian uniforms and separately among most military uniforms. It's really difficult. The photographs generally are not that precise, not that sharp, and until recently. If you're looking at people who work for the railways, the tramways, the police, the post office, they're all going to look kind of similar. There's estate differences in sort of badges and slight cut and slight angle of the helmet or whatever. But it's going to be really hard to work out. So the best thing to do really is look at the, sorry, I'm just looking across at my note here, which is to look at the photo collections and the catalogues for the state museums and for the state libraries and look for something similar. If you do see a number on a uniform, that's great, because it's going to tell you that they're a government employee and they work for a transport agency or for the post office or for the police. And once you've got that number and once you can tell that, if you do have an idea of which colony or state it is, then you can go to the search engines of whatever the state archives is and start trying to find them then. If you're looking at wedding photographs in the 20th century and you see a uniform in it, don't assume that that's during the World Wars, because it's probably more common that's going to be just a couple of years after those wars, because men are still wearing those uniforms for photographs. They take the uniforms home, they're proud of them. And in a way, those wedding photographs tell a story. I've been away at war and I've survived. I've come back and I've married my sweetheart. So those uniforms, those photographs are more likely going to be 1918, 1946, 47. But then in a way, that's pretty easy to pick too, isn't it? Because you go to the births, deaths and marriages websites and sort that out too. But anyway, it's a good visual illustration of a happy ending.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if you know, many people would have photographs, like you say, of weddings, but they may not know who it is. So it might give them a starting point if they look.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today, Craig. It's been really useful chatting with you about occupations and uniforms.
Oh, no, thank you, Cassie. Yeah, I've been interested in uniforms since I was a kid. Not, I like to say, in a weird way, just, you know, in a way. Yeah. And I just love thinking about uniforms and what they mean, what they tell you about the wearer, what they tell you about society. So, yeah, it's nice to talk to someone about them. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.